All right, I'm going to just jump right into this because I'm so excited to have you back. I guess not really back. This is the first time it's just Candace, the Candace
That's
show.
true. Yeah, the last time I did your show, it had a feeling like the next time I do this show, it's going to be in a different place.
PBD accurately predicted that as well, but he told me that that was his favorite thing to watch was the conversation between me and you. And
Oh,
he
yeah?
because we both were just like you're a massive talent and it's obvious
Oh, well,
that
thank you.
you're on your rocket ship as they say, where people are realizing like, wait, who is this guy? He's just supposed to be a comedian, but he actually knows so much about politics.
I promise it's more of a comment on the rest of society than it is on me. I should be just a comedian. But
That's how I feel
but
about me too, where I'm like, I think all I said was like black people don't have to be Democrats, and then things exploded, and I don't really know why because it
I
wasn't
know.
that genius.
Well, there's something about it like too that your first I think take that really launched into this chapter of your career was just like I sure do feel bad about all these dead Palestinian babies. And and then everybody's like, "What do you hate Jewish people?" And you're like, "Okay, that's it's Tucker Carlson. By the way, I should say Patrick Bet David is great. I love that guy, and his whole operation is incredible. But you ever hear the thing Tucker Carlson said? I really liked it, where he said, "You know if a wound is infected because you touch it and you recoil."
Right.
And there's like something about that in life in general where you like find these infections. It's almost like when you just say something really simple and then everyone's like, oh, it's like, wait, if that's controversial, there's something sinister going on here. And that's almost like that's like, you're like, wait, if you're telling me I feel bad about seeing a dead baby and that's offensive, then I need to read a lot more about what's going on here because something evil is happening.
That's me. I'm just so curious when I see, and I think another colloquial way to say it is they say it's a hit dog that hollers.
Right.
Perfect example of that was when I tweeted genocide is always wrong, and Dave Rubin just spazzed, and I just was like, "What is happening right now? Why are you freaking out?" Completely had it wrong. I wasn't even talking about Israel in that tweet. I was talking about Brian Mass and something that he said in Congress. But the way people responded, the fact that it got like 40,000 retweets, and I'm going, this used to be a totally acceptable thing to say that everyone agreed on, that we shouldn't be aspiring to genocide. And suddenly it's like this hot topic and people were covering me all the time. And from that moment on, I was just on the hit list. You know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about? The hit list,
Mm-hmm.
where you've said a thing, we don't accept the thing. So now we're just going to, I guess, try to psychologically wear you down by writing hit pieces of things that you didn't say to try to convince general public that you're the crazy one and we're not just psychopaths that believe in genocide.
Yeah. Yeah. Being against genocide shouldn't be too controversial.
But it is. It is today. And you are, I think, obviously, you are right at the heart of it because you're like me during BLM. I was black saying common sense, like, hey, I know like that there's white people here, but they're not, they were never slave owners. And we can't just take all their money and take their jobs and tell them to literally at one point they were getting on their hands and knees and cleaning black people's shoes at the height of BLM. People
I
should go
remember.
back. And I was against that. And I said, this is kind of crazy. You're now the Jewish person who's saying common sense, like, hey, this is kind of crazy. Like, America shouldn't be pledging allegiance to everything that Israel wants to do. And I think that's what's landed you in some hot water.
Well, I think, and there's a lot of parallels there. Not everything. There's differences in the situation, but I think one of the parallels is also that it's like, as you were saying with the Black Lives Matter stuff, that also like, hey, this isn't good for us. Like, it's not even just like first and foremost, it's not right. But even additionally to that, like this isn't helping black people any. Some white dude doing some performance ritual of like cleaning your shoes or whatever. This doesn't actually do anything for black people. This isn't elevating us to like the next level. This isn't like getting the black people who are struggling in America out of poverty or something like that. None of this helps. And in fact, all you're doing really is kind of getting like privileged black people who were already going to be fine a nicer house.
Right.
This is nothing. And I kind of do feel the same way. Like, first and foremost, I think what Israel's doing to the Palestinians is wrong. Even actually, first and foremost, I think it's my country should not be involved in it because it's hurting my country. But on top of that, after that, I guess, I also don't think this is good for Jewish people. I don't think this is good for Israel and then more broadly for Jewish people. I think this is creating a whole lot of resentment against them. It's actually like this kind of sick, self-fulfilling prophecy where you are creating the conditions where actually something really bad could happen. And I don't want to see that.
And
So
that's what I
yeah.
was saying to black people. I was just like, if you think that because the people are pretending to like you because they're fearful of losing their jobs, that means they really like you, like, that's not what you want. You want people to just like you,
Yeah.
right? Because you're going, "This is a good person, and I think that I wanna work with this person because they're hardworking, because they're intelligent." When they know that basically they got thugged into this,
Yeah.
what do you think is going on behind closed doors? What do you think they're actually saying about you behind closed doors? I don't want people to look at me and think that everywhere that I am, it's simply because BLM went crazy following George Floyd, and they're just terrified to lose their jobs, and so they're just sort of subjecting themselves to this harassment, because at a certain point, BLM just became a full throttle harassment of white people
Yeah.
in every single regard. And it is interesting because I recognized that the people that were responding initially to the George Floyd thing were doing so out of a what I describe as a childhood trigger. I think a lot of the things that we've been conditioned and a lot of our responses are due to childhood traumas that are happening in the classroom. So like they've got us public school system, you know, Jimmy Carter kind of signed in the Department of Education into law. I think it was in the 1970. And at that very moment, they were like, okay, now we can propagandize these kids and they'll have triggers. They don't even realize they're triggers when they become adults. And so for Black people, we are learning without us even realizing it that slavery, racism is like the worst evil that could possibly exist. Think about you go through this emotional conditioning. This could happen any day. So it becomes very easy when people who want to achieve power to just go, hey, Black America, like Trump's about to get elected. You're going to be back in chains. And Black Americans believe that. Like
Yeah.
it's such a ridiculous thing, ridiculous notion that in 2020, had Trump have been elected, that or 2016, pardon, had he been elected, we would go back and change. But the majority of Black Americans legitimately believe this because the media was insisting on it. And then we had this childhood trauma. Jewish Americans, it's the Holocaust, right? It's like we spend a lot of time studying the Holocaust, and it's actually a trigger for all Americans, myself included. And I saw this happening where instantly, whatever happened in Israel, the first thing that was being correlated was the Holocaust.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, when I was when I debated Dennis Prager for that zero hedge debate, there was one point where he was, and I don't know if you could capture this on video, but I was only like a few feet away from him. But there was one point where he was talking about Jew hatred and how it's a different virus than everything else, and it lies. And he was like, his eyes were getting watery, like he was like getting emotional, like he believed it. You know what I mean? And there was almost like a moment I almost wanted to like put my arm around him and be like, hey man, like none of this is real, dude. So like, it's okay. You don't have to be scared. Like, there's not about to be another Holocaust.
No.
That's just not. And there is like this deep-rooted trauma that like gets passed on through generations, where it's like this real belief that this could happen at any moment. And I just don't. I was somebody on Twitter told me recently the other day that they said they go 20% of Americans want to see Jewish people exterminated. And they go, they'll never say that. But about 20%, which first off kind of begs the question of like, well, how did you scientifically arrive at this number of 20? Like, if they won't say that, how do you just know? But also just that's totally not true. Like even amongst like people who do hate Jews, like even like think of like whatever it is, whoever the person on Twitter who you're like, that guy really does hate Jews. Even amongst his following, it's not 20% who
No.
actually want to see Jews exterminated. It's just not true. 20% of the broader American people but imagine if you're living in a world in your mind where you think 20% of our society wants to see you and your kids and your grandma all murdered. I mean, you're going to make different calculations than if you're dealing with real life.
And then that's also being reinforced by the media. So
Yep.
it's like if you have that trauma coming up and then you're going, oh my gosh, could this be? And then the media is like, yes, you are going to be in chains. That little feeling you had is completely valid. And this is what happened. The MAGA people want to bring back the slave boats, and they want you to be picking cotton again in the South. People, it's absurd. It's an absurd notion, but people believe it because they are naturally emotional because of their high childhood education. And then when you couple that with the media, that's why I think the most important thing for people to learn about is the fact that you had people like Edward Bernays who were seeing how you could experiment, the nephew of Sigmund Freud,
Yeah.
how you could experiment and how psychology could become this tool to modify human behavior, that you could get people to quite literally not believe their own eyes. Like if you say something enough, they will become irrational. Like they will say, even though I'm objectively looking at Candace Owens, I need to believe now that she is an internalized hating Black person bigot and that she's not really Black. rather than to think that maybe she just doesn't agree with what BLM is doing.
Well, that's why Bernays is such a fascinating figure, because it's like that the connection between like marketing and propaganda and how it all works on our subconscious and our kind of irrational brains. But like if you just think about the fact that, you know, when they'll say like like what it costs to have a billboard in Times Square, or so, you know, like some huge Coca-Cola billboard, and they'll be like, that's, you know, $300 million to have that all year long. What's crazy is that that's worth it to Coca-Cola. Like it's worth it to pay whatever the number is, you know what I mean? Like insane amounts of money just to have a huge Coca-Cola billboard at the top of Times Square, because in all of our, you know, monkey brains, that goes like legitimacy. I mean, look, they're up there in these big lights, and that's worth it to them to pay. And so you just notice this in general with like what you were talking about with people who come up in public schools and the way they're propagandized. It's like they're taught to, you know, like when they accuse people of dog whistles, like they're taught to hear dog whistles, that person is not even whistling.
Right.
That person might, you know, like make America great again. Well, you know what that means. You know, when America was great, you know what they're saying.
Right.
They're saying enslave you.
Yeah.
Even though that was never said. Like if I were to go and give a talk at a college campus, which I never will. But let's just say hypothetically, I was invited to go talk to like regular liberal arts college kids. I mean, it's not that they would hear my argument and then say, no, look, we have a counter argument, that we disagree with you, we've been taught this or whatever. It's that they'd hear what I say and they'd immediately know in their soul that what I'm really trying to say is that I'm a terrible person, I'm a bigot, or you know what I mean? Like they're trained to already dismiss your argument before you can even make your argument or anything. You know, if you say blacks instead of, you know, African Americans or whatever, they already hear you're a bigot. If you say something like it, you know, whatever the argument might be, you can't even get to that argument because they're already trained to be like, you know, this Pavlovian like trick of like, nope, I already know you're a bad person. That stuff works.
It really works. And what's so interesting is that these are Soviet tools. And the reason why they do target the youth is because you're naturally more inclined to emotion when you're younger. Like you think about your high school relationship for most people versus like the person that you marry. Like when you are young, it is just raw emotion at all times. Everything is that you're perceiving as a reality is a lot of times just your emotion. And so they think carefully about what books they even want you to read at a certain age, because it will leave an indelible mark on you. It will leave an indelible mark on your childhood to read something that's so horrific. And you actually don't even know what the facts are. You just know how you felt when you read something.
Yeah.
And again, that will eventually elicit a response because everything is political at the end of the day. They're doing that intentionally to train children to believe in certain concepts, to disbelieve certain concepts, and to react to things, even when the concepts are obscure. We need you to react. So we're just going to somehow say that this thing that is racist is not, that this thing is anti-Semitic, that is actually not. Something that's so rational, which is like, hey, it's obviously not acceptable, which was a weird moment when you were debating Ami, when I was like, would it be acceptable if Bibi Netanyahu killed every last Palestinian to get to Hamas? And he just couldn't instantly say, no, that wouldn't be acceptable. That, like, it's such a wild concept.
And he did get there.
He got there, I think, once I kind of like said to him, like, that makes me very uncomfortable.
But you see where he's got to like almost check in his own mind. Like he's like, wait, would this, what, you know, like what are the implications of me saying this? And then eventually to get, whereas this should just be like a knee jerk, obviously that's not okay.
No,
you know?
like, we're not going to kill every civilian.
That's not okay. But then you almost have to wonder like, well, what's the implication of that? And of course it is. It's really, I mean, essentially it's a reducto absurdum, right? That you're saying like, okay, well, what if we took this logic all the way to its conclusion? And in the same sense of like, if somebody's like, hey, we should raise the minimum wage to $25 an hour or something, you're like, well, how about $1,000 an hour? Like, should we do that? And then, and it's not that that disproves 25, but at least if someone goes, no, well, that would be a disaster, you go, okay, so you admit that there's a certain point where you'd have to say this would be a disaster. Okay, so now let's talk about, but the problem is that I think a lot of people who are all in on this one side, they recognize that as soon as they concede that, then it's like, oh, we could start walking this back, and I might have to concede that there's a real moral problem with just killing tens of thousands of people. Even if we haven't killed 2 million, it's like, oh, that might be. And so people are very hesitant to want to give you that because they think there might be an implication to their own, which of course there is, you know, which like the implication is basically that like, yeah, killing innocent people is wrong and you don't want to be on the side of people doing that. But it is, it's kind of laid bare when you could ask someone like, okay, so you're telling me you could kill every last Palestinian and there'd be no moral issue with that? And if you even have to hesitate before you answer that, like you got some problems with your moral foundations.
Right, and that is really where I've arrived at, whereas people do have problems with their moral foundations, which is why they have to come up with these words. They have to always come up with these terms to describe people who are quite moral. Like, I don't believe that we are justified in murdering 1 million Iraqi civilians looking for weapons of mass destruction that never existed. By the way, they're losing their creativity. Every time they want to go to war, they're kind of saying the same stuff over and over again. I just saw what's his face in an interview saying like, well, Iran, they've got nuclear, they are really close. They've got these weapons. I'm like, didn't we already run this with Iraq? And didn't you
Look,
already
I've
tell
seen
us
this
that we
episode.
had to do this, like BB speech, like we've got to do this, like to keep the world free? Didn't actually objectively tell me one thing that's gotten better in America since 9/11, 2001, because that's where they always like, this is 12 9/11s, whatever it is. Tell me one thing that got better, safer, or freer in America since we decided that we were going to go to war in the Middle East perpetually. And the answer is nothing. People don't even remember this. And this is what concerns me. And it's why it's so important to teach people real history and not what they're learning in their school, because America is not only a young country, but we're becoming younger in our minds because we're not even learning American history correctly. We're being lied to about American history, McCarthyism, the Spanish Inquisition, everything that we're learning is actually a lie. But what happens is that when you keep that mindset so young and you don't have a memory, is you have no memory of freedom, right? And this conversation I have with my husband actually is something that always stays with me because I said, China, you got a country, what is it now, 1.7 billion
Yeah.
people, a crazy number. I think India may have just passed them. You got so many of these people and the government is so small. I go, why won't they just revolt against the government? And George said to me, because they have no memory of freedom. They think it's just how it's always been. And that's what's going to happen in America. Like, we have kids, and I'm one of them, that don't remember that you used to just be allowed to walk onto the plane.
Yeah.
You didn't have to get strip searched. You didn't have to take your belt off your shoe. You could just go onto the plane, greet people at the gate. Like, we were a
Yeah,
freer
like
country.
it's like to Gen Z because you ever watch like any of those old rom-coms where they would always run up to the gate of the plane? Like, yeah, you used to be able to do that.
Yeah.
You could just chase your high school sweetheart all the way right up to her flight and then, profess your undying love to her. No, look, I mean the country that I grew up in, I was born in 1983, so like I was a little kid in the 80s and then like a kid in the 90s. That country is gone.
Mm-mm.
And it's really sad because it was a much better country in a lot of ways.
And do
But
you feel
there's
freer? Because the problem was like, oh, hey, we got to do that because we got to keep bombing the Middle East because you're for your safety and for your freedom. And I'm like, I think by every metric, we're less safe. You're looking at like just crime rates,
well,
and we're less free. It's like,
well, there was a regional expert who testified before Congress in 2002, and he said that he guaranteed, and this is a regional expert, he guaranteed that if we overthrew Saddam Hussein, there would be massive positive reverberations throughout the region. There's Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's a regional expert. So I'm just waiting. I mean, it's going to happen at some point,
well,
but
now
it
he
may
says
take a little more time.
First, they thought it was Iraq, but then he testified also that it was if we did it to Syria. Then also, I think he said Libya.
He mentioned Libya, yeah.
But now we're at Iran. So this time,
Well, he did mention Iran in that testimony. He always wanted us to overthrow Iran, but he's still on that one because we did the other ones for him.
It's just this last one.
Yeah, that's right.
And then America is going to be so much freer and so much safer, and gas prices are going to be low, and the roads are going to be paved, and we're going to be able to just get onto the plane. Why does it feel like we're just being lied to? And so the question then becomes for me and everyone who's logically thinking through this and realizing that our country is in full decline. Which country is getting better? Because it's not ours because of these never-ending wars that we keep not winning, by the way. That's also a small thing we don't talk about. We're not winning these wars. So what actually is the point of these wars in your view?
Well, I mean, I think, okay, so there's a lot of times there's kind of like there'll be a core group of people who actually do have like a real ideology. But the reason why that ideology gets picked up in DC is because it's very good for business. Like in and not just in DC, in academia and throughout like kind of the establishment. There's people like Keynes or John Rawls or someone like that who were pretty dumb. Like, they're not impressive people. Their theories are garbage. I mean, if you like sat down like Keynes and then you like put Thomas Sowell up against him. He'll just like utterly dismantle his arguments. I mean, they're just terrible. Or like someone who's more of like a monetary theorist guy, but like, you know, if you read Hayek versus Keynes, there's no way you could think Keynes was like a better economist. But what Keynes prescribes is that DC ought to have a whole lot of power. And what, you know, Thomas Sowell is prescribing is that they ought to have much less power than they have today. So who do you think's more popular in DC, you know? And so there might be some true believing Keynesians, but that's not necessarily why everyone in DC gets on board with them. So with the war stuff, I mean, these neoconservatives, I think a lot of them do, like, they believe in their dogma. But the reason why they took over the entire foreign policy establishment is also because, like, well, their recommendations also allow these weapons companies to make a ton of money. They allow politicians to have more power. So there's, you know, there's a lot going on there. But as I'm sure you know, I mean, and this comes off like, you know, it's almost like people are trained to dismiss this as kind of kooky, but it's the reality for everybody who knows this stuff knows it. What the neocons are essentially the Likud vanguard in America. And they've all of the, and they write it in their own words. I mean, you can go, you know, I think I mentioned this last time I was on your show, but just for everyone, if they want to read this, go read A Clean Break, A New Strategy for Securing the Realm. And it was written by Richard Pearl and David Wormser to Benjamin Netanyahu in 1996, when he first became prime minister. This was their letter to Benjamin Netanyahu on what the new strategy for Israel ought to be. And the new strategy for Israel, what is regime change in Iraq? Making deals, bribing off the surrounding Arab countries so you don't have to do this silly peace process thing that every US president had been insisting you do. And so that's, you know, this is a huge part of why we've embarked on these terror wars over the last 20 plus years.
So your perspective is we're doing this because it's actually securing Israel, not because it's securing America.
Jumping in here to remind you that for the third year in a row, Hallow is having their wildly popular Saints in 7 Days prayer challenge. Over 4 weeks, you will journey through the life of an incredible saint, learning more about their life, faith, story, and ultimate surrender to the will of God in their life. On August 5th, the challenge will kick off with Joe Mazzulla, the coach of the Celtics, and Saint Sebastian, the patron saint of athletes. Then, Rhea Wahlberg will lead meditations on the life of Saint Elizabeth Seton. Following Rhea, Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus in The Chosen, will go through the powerful stories of Saint Maximilian Kolbe, who sacrificed his own life for the life of another at Auschwitz. We will end the series with Father David Michael Moses and Blessed Pierre Giorgio Frassati, who is set to be canonized next summer. Saints in 7 Days has been some of the most popular content on the Hallow app because you go deep into the lesser-known parts of a saint's life to recognize that they are not much different than we are, and that sainthood is not some far-off, unattainable goal. So download Hallow today and strive to become a saint. You can download Hallow for 3 months free at hallow.com/Candace. Again, that's hallow.com/Candace.
That's certainly a huge element to it. You know, I mean, like there's other elements, but that's a huge component of it.
So Israel, very small country, like size of New Jersey. How is it that that small country has been able to garner so much power over the American politicians, right? Over the American political scene. Forget politicians. We would also talk about the publications. There is clearly a neocon movement. The news stations, there was clearly a neocon movement. And you just wonder, because I came at this truly as a conservative. I am a proud isolationist. So I've held the same perspective. I love Thomas Massie, he's my favorite congressman, that while our nation is in decline, we should not be sending any money overseas. And that was totally fine in the conservative movement. Like everyone agreed with me and everyone agreed with me on Afghanistan. They agreed with me, kind of. Some neocons were actually very radically pro-Ukraine, even though they were trying to mask it. But then on the Israel stuff, they're just like, no, like this is different. This is a different carve out. And I'm going, why and how?
And not just that it's like different, but that they immediately become the woke. Like it's not just like that. It's like, oh no, I think this is an exception. And here's my argument why. It's like racist. Yeah. Shut up, racist. You're not allowed, and you're like, whoa! I thought that was the whole thing we
The
were
woke
against.
right, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I literally just said that the other day that I think the woke right are the worst of all of them. I mean, like it's more ridiculous than the woke left even, and at least the woke left isn't like pretending to not be the woke
That's
left.
why
You
I
know,
actually
like
hate the neocons more than I
yeah,
hate the left, because at least they're owning that this is what we do. Like, we will always use emotional arguments to talk about slavery, but the woke right pretends that they don't do that, and like they believe in free speech and the best idea should win, unless it's an issue that they care about. Then they're like more woke than anybody else. Like,
yeah, that's right. I mean, and with the exact same tactics, just dismiss you, smear you, and also just that like the neocons. I mean, we were talking about this briefly before, but the thing that just what I hate so much about them is how much they also like I'm old enough to remember the George W. Bush years and the Barack Obama years really well. Like, I remember them quite vividly. And every single neocon who but had the support of every right-wing talk radio show host in America, like the entire Conservatism Inc., through all of the Bush years and all of the Obama years, had no problem demonizing Muslims in the most vicious ways. I mean, it was all, oh yeah, I mean, do you remember the biggest thing in the world was that they were putting a little mosque a few blocks away from where the World Trade Center had collapsed? It had nothing, they made this out like they're replacing the towers with a mosque, and the Sharia law is coming to America. And when they were trying to sell the next war, they were fine with like, be really worried about radical Islam. This was the big criticism of Obama from every dumb Marco Rubio Republican. He won't even say radical Islamic jihad or something. As Obama is dropping every bomb ever on the Muslim world, their complaint was that he's not going hard enough against radical Islam. And then when Donald Trump rose up and was like, we don't need to be fighting these wars. We shouldn't have fought the war in Iraq. And then he goes, I want a ban on Muslim immigration into America. So, whatever he said, till we figure out what's going on. Then they all turned around and went, racist.
yeah.
You evil racist. You can't demonize Muslims like this. And it was like, dude, I remember you were just doing this 5 minutes ago. And likewise, like I was talking about in 2004, when George W. Bush was trying to get reelected, and it was a close election, and the war was already getting fairly unpopular, what they ran on was a constitutional amendment to ban gay marriage. They tried to find the wedge issues and then be on the conservative side of it and get the conservatives riled up and say, hey, we're going to be on your side for this so we can get reelected. And then as soon as Donald Trump was the most popular thing, they became Democrats. And they went, look how racist these right-wingers are. They're coming after the LGBTQ community or whatever. Like they have no actual cultural beliefs. They just want the war powers. So they'll use whatever side they can, stoke up resentment amongst Americans so that they can get into power to keep the war machine going.
Right. But it just begs the question is like, how can such a small group of people garner this much power? And I think the truth is because they just have a lot of money. I mean, talk about the military industrial complex. It's unbelievable how much money they have to dedicate to these efforts, these propagandized efforts. And this goes back to why I say it's so important for people to look at the declassified documents of the CIA. Like, you need to comprehend that a lot of things that you would believe are conspiracies because you're coming out of your public education system programming and you're just like, you probably believe the government is kind of good. You just need to look at some declassified docs, Operation Mockingbird, the money spent. Like, these journalists are paid to say whatever. And at the end of the day, money talks. And I'm sorry, it's like tale as old as time. Money talks, and people will quite literally do anything for their bottom line. This is why you don't see ideological consistency. Just like you're saying, there's no ideological consistency. Even Don Lemon, like, he totally flipped. People don't remember the old Don Lemon where he sat down with Morgan Freeman and spoke about how, like, he doesn't want to be seen as just a black man, how he doesn't like that people use race to further themselves. And then suddenly BLM came, and I don't know what he was offered, but this man turned into a total hypocrite in terms of the things that he had said prior.
So I mean, he would have called somebody a Nazi if they were saying the same things that he said with Morgan Freeman. I mean, he would have been like, that is the most vicious racist in America. Do you ever see the thing where he had like the list for young black men of like things they're supposed to do?
Yes.
And it was like, pull up your pants, speak English properly, and look, by the way, not bad advice. I mean, like, not bad advice for someone if you want to get your life together. It's like, yes, okay. And there should be people like that. Now, I don't know that Don Lemon was ever going to be that figure in the black community that like really spoke to young thugs in the streets and got them to pull their pants up or something like that. Like, I don't know if the gay guy on CNN was going to be their thought leader, but it's not bad advice, you know? And like, but he would never, I mean, yeah, look, I was thinking about this just recently because it's, you know, because Kamala Harris's track record has been coming up, and it is pretty funny how there was, so like when I was younger, there was the Democrats were always racing to not be seen as wimpy liberals, because that had been the knock on them forever, particularly after like the 70s, the very bad crime. There had been bad crime in blue cities around America. Republicans were running as law and order candidates, and then Joe Biden was a big part of this. Bill Clinton was a part of this, where they tried to race to the other side and be like, no, we're law and order Democrats. Look at this crime bill we just passed. We're going to throw all these people in jail. We're going to ramp up the mandatory minimums. And Kamala Harris was almost at the tail end of that as a prosecutor in California, where she wasn't one of these progressive prosecutors. She was like a Reaganite, hardcore, oh, you got caught with marijuana, you're doing time,
Oh, yeah.
truancy laws, like whatever it is, like throw the book at them. But does anyone have any doubt that if Kamala Harris was a prosecutor today, she would just be one of the progressive prosecutors? Because that's what's in now. She doesn't actually have anything that she believes in other than just gaining power. So it's like nowadays she'd be like, hey, we can't arrest people for shoplifting. That's racism or whatever. And she's even saying things like that now. But then people go, but look at your track record. And it's really as simple as like, oh, that was the thing we were doing then.
Yeah.
Like now we're doing this thing. I don't know.
What is your opinion? Because so much has happened. I feel like we've had the longest 3-4 weeks in politics ever,
Yeah.
especially with the assassination attempt, which they already want to move on from. That really should tell you something. Like President Trump just almost got shot on stage, and already they're like, yeah, he's a racist again. You know, it's been like,
Yeah, it seems like we should get a month for that.
Can we get at least a month? No, just a couple of weeks to get over that so we can go back to calling him and all of his supporters racist who are going to end democracy, even though we almost just watched democracy get ended on live TV when they tried to take out a person who's running for president. But anyways, I feel that the political flipboard is changing, that people who had platforms before are not going to have platforms in a couple of years. It feels to me like the scales are falling from people's eyes in a very good way. But I don't think that things will ever be the same post-assassination attempt. I think this is a different Donald J. Trump in a lot of ways. And I wanted to get your read on what's happening with the Democrats, what's happening with the Republicans, and what the future looks like.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. I think we're in the middle of a major realignment, which has probably been slow moving for a while now, but it does seem to really be speeding up. I think that, you know, to your point, that I think there's a lot of people who have exposed themselves for good and for bad. And that I do tend to agree with you, that I think there's like a major reckoning coming. And I think that Israel has been a huge topic on that, but there's a lot of other things that, you know, it's almost hard for us to appreciate the normie perspective on a lot of things and like take a step back and realize like how many people just realized that the entire corporate media was covering for Joe Biden for all these years, that there was literally a senile man there still is a senile man in the White House who we all deem to be too senile to run a campaign for 4 months, yet can be the commander-in-chief for 5.5 months until January, right? So like that's waking a lot of people up. I think that Donald Trump, one of the really interesting effects of Donald Trump surviving this assassination attempt was that essentially the entire establishment had to admit they were lying. And they did this in a kind of subtle way, but I think it's too obvious for people to miss. So like, look, there was a few notable exceptions. There's like Keith Olbermann's of the world out there who are like, yeah, he's Hitler. I wish the guy had killed him, right? But not too many people were willing to go that route.
Right.
So you have Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, all of them wish Donald Trump a speedy recovery, say there's no place for political violence. Everybody in the corporate media said the same thing. But like, so what does that tell you? You know, you can't say a guy's literally Hitler for 8 years and then wish Hitler a speedy recovery, right? It's like it's one of the other. Either democracy is on the line or political violence is never acceptable.
Right.
You can't have both of those.
Right.
You can't, and the only thing they have, and this has been true since 2016, the only thing they have to deal with Donald Trump is to take it up to 11. They have to call him literally Hitler, existential threat. He's going to launch nukes. The stock market's going to crash. America's over as we know it. Now, this is already much harder because he has a 4-year track record. But now, once they started wishing him well and
Right.
denouncing political violence, it's almost like, oh, you just gave up your whole game.
Right,
That was
exactly.
everything you were running on. So I do think this is a big sea change
Right.
right
And
now.
I do think, again, like the people are just starting to go, wait a second. Some of the stuff that I thought was full on conspiracy theory and sounded cuckoo to me and nuts to me, there's actually some truth to this. And that's one of the things that I've been doing on the new show, because there were so many topics that I wanted to cover. And I think that we all go through this. Is again, it all goes back to psychology. I'm fascinating. And that's why learning about Edward Bernays, it was actually a good exercise, because it steeled me. You know, like I was just sort of like, okay, actually, now I know that my gut, those gut instincts mean something, and that there have been people working for years to make you go against your gut instinct, like to make you, I mean, there was a CIA experiment where they held up a picture of something, and everyone was a Fed in the room except for one person, because they wanted to see, held up a picture, I'm giving an example here of an apple, and they just went around the room and they said, what do you see? And they had every Fed to say, banana, 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 banana. So just wait to get that last guy who wasn't a Fed to see if he would say banana, even though they were clearly holding a picture of apple. And guess what he said? He said effing banana, right? So I'm like, oh, no. I got to be the person who's going to straight up just be like, no, that's an apple and you're all crazy, because that is the power of psychology. They understand that there is a madness to crowds, and that if you say it enough times, people hear it enough times, enough people repeat the thing, then people will accept that as a reality. And so it's been one of the most shocking things for me to like look back into American history, because way too many times Alex Jones has been right. I want to say that right now. Alex Jones has been right way too many times, right? I am not comfortable with how many times Alex Jones, who I grew up thinking was a total psychopath, has been correct when you go watch the old clips and you're like, what the heck? How did he know that this was going to happen? Maybe he's just been awake for a very long time. Doesn't mean he's always right, but it does mean that he's been right too many times. And the more that I peel back this onion and realize and challenge my conditioning from childhood, it's quite scary, and it gets scary and it gets sinister, because you realize, like, when we're saying that these people worship Satan, no, like literally there were people in American history that worshiped Satan. And that's why I sent to you, like, do you know about the origins of NASA? That's insane. Like Jack Parsons, who established the Apollo program, well, the precursor to the Apollo program, which is like jet propulsion, the jet propulsion program. He literally worshiped Satan. Like, they were doing these experiments in the Devil's Canyon, and they were having sexual rituals, thinking that they could summon demons. He wanted to get a woman that was pregnant, like a virgin pregnant, and name it the Moonchild. He found a redheaded person. He practiced a religion called Thelema, which was Aleister Crowley, who was a full Satanist, named the most wicked man in the world. He was considered his protege. They had a great relationship. And so I'm just like, okay, that makes me very uncomfortable. Like,
well, if nothing else, you're like, this is really fascinating. Why is no one talking about this? Like, and maybe it's like, you know, sometimes with these things, you're like, okay, I don't know how deep this runs. But like, it's like just when you see like in Bohemian Grove or something like that, you're like, okay, so we have video footage of you guys doing some crazy weird ritual. Okay, so you're telling me that like our political leaders and like cultural influential people and bankers and all these people, they get together and do weird rituals? Like, okay. Can we ask some more questions about that? Like, what exactly is the answer to that? And it is bizarre how much, particularly the Bohemian Grove one, because it is real. We have video of it. People admit that they've gone to it. We have Richard Nixon on tape talking about how, I won't use his language for it, but you know, like you could go find how he described it. And so you're like, and then
homosexuals, we'll use that word. Like, there's a lot of homosexuals.
And then you go, so wait, so you're telling me that nobody in the media, like we don't have one investigative journalist who's like really interested in this story and getting to the bottom of it? Now again, there are some.
That's
but
what's scary. It's like then I started getting interested in Aleister Crowley. This guy was an elitist. Like, this is not like some random guy who was like, like, I believe in Satan, I'm going to write this book. It became a religion amongst the elites, and that's what's scary. Like, he was best friends with the guy running Vanity Fair. He was best friends with this guy establishing the Apollo program.
Right.
He was funded, and with all of these elitists, they loved him. And now they try to soften that. And I'm like, no, this is very scary, because they kept getting caught having sexual rituals. One such story, by the way, and again, this stuff that I'm saying to you, you don't need to go on a deep Reddit feed. This is on Wikipedia. One such story is like Mussolini kicked him out of Italy because they were having one of their sex rituals. Like they believed the elites would get together and they would have sex rituals in order to like summon spirits. Like this was what his religion believed in. And he got kicked out by Mussolini because somebody actually died in one of these sexual rituals because they wanted to take their ecstasy to the next level. I mean, really bonkers stuff. And when he gets kicked out, he goes and stays at his friend's house in France. Who are his friends? Barbara Bush's parents. Like, you know, it was like crazy stuff like that where you're just going, okay, so this is the fact, like just what you're saying, that we have these mainstream media journalists who pretend that everything that you've ever heard is crazy. The satanic panic in the 70s is crazy. And then when you start doing your own research and you learn, and you're just interested, like I was just interested in learning about the moon landings, the Apollo program, and you keep coming up with people that are involved in sex rituals, it's unnerving. But it's unnerving in a way that actually brought me back or closer to faith. Because I'm going, okay, America, and this was a clip from Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan that I actually do want to play for you because I will play it on my podcast over and over and over again. Actually, I'll pause right now and play it.
Okay, so the template that you're using to understand this is like science fiction, right? These are an advanced race of beings from somewhere else. But the template that every other society before us has used is a spiritual one. Mm-hmm. There is a whole world that we can't see that acts on people, a supernatural world. It's acting on us all the time for good and bad. Every society has thought this before ours. In fact, every society in all recorded history has thought that until, I'll be specific, August 1945 when we dropped the atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And all of a sudden, the West is just officially secular. We're God. There is no God but us. And that's the world that we have grown up in. But that's an anomaly. Like no one else has ever thought that. There's never been a society that thought that. Every other society has assumed, and they've had all kinds of different explanations, and the details differ. But the core idea does not differ, never has differed from caves until now, that we're being acted on by spiritual forces at all times.
So that particular segment, it just really hit at me because I was going, okay, so much of what is sold to us in the public school system is we're our own gods, we're secular. Atheism is now very popular, but this is very new. And it's not new because we became a wiser society. It's new because we became incredibly unwise.
And kind of evil.
Right, and very evil. And so when I look into history and I see that these people were doing these rituals and trying to summon demons. And like I said, Aleister Crowley, like he was with the elites, like all of these old, like what's that Yale Skull and Bones Club? He was having like a sexual affair with one of the guys there and somebody that was at all of these schools. Like a Cambridge club is where they were having their sexual rituals. And you look throughout history at how many times elites got caught having sexual rituals. And I'm talking about recent history, like the last 150 years. I went, okay, if they believed in this, and these people that had the access to the most wealth and the most money, that they believed in spiritualism in a demonic way, then people better wake up right now and realize that spiritual forces are still at play. And if you're not even speaking about that and you don't think God is real, then you're essentially the person that's bringing like a knife to a figurative gunfight. Like I think that this has been going on for a long time in America and that we have been being impacted by spiritual forces. I mean, even Cat Williams, when he went on Joe Rogan and he starts talking about Baphomet and Hollywood, and I'm going, dude, what is going on that you now have people in Hollywood that are telling you like Hollywood was meant to disrupt you spiritually? Don't even think about it in terms of science fiction. Like think about it like spiritually when they're propagandizing you and getting people to agree with certain ideas. That's a hypnosis. Do you know what I mean?
Right. And that there's people at, say, like the Bohemian Grove or something like that who are doing these rituals, whatever it is exactly that they believe in. But they're not pushing on the broader public that you ought to believe in their religion too. Right. They're pushing on you atheism. Mm-hmm. They're pushing on you. There's no such thing. Like, this is just nutty to even think there's a spiritual world, yet they seem very convinced that there is. Look, I also think, like, as I've gotten older, I think that a lot of times, even atheists and very religious people are almost quibbling over semantics. Like, it's almost like we all know this is true. We all know that there's darkness and there's light and there's good and there's bad. And that in itself proves like the spiritual to be true. Like it's not, I remember one time I watched this and I can't remember who it was, but it was one of these like atheism versus Christianity debates.
Like Sam Harris.
And yeah, it was like one of those big ones. I can't remember specifically who was in there, like Christopher Hitchens or something. I don't remember who was at. But they were arguing at one point and the Christian was talking about evil spirits. and how evil spiritual forces play on people in people's lives. And then the atheist at one point was like, we don't have to go to magic. You know, we could just deal with like science in the real world, and we don't have to talk about how there's spirits and things like that. And he goes, yes, people fall victim to depression and alcoholism and all of addiction and these things. And we all know that there are dark forces that, you know, like people can fall into and blah, blah, blah. And I remember just sitting there and going like, wait, but what the hell was that? Dark forces? I mean, what do you even mean by
Star
that? You're
Wars,
like, what
or
are we,
is it like
so,
demonic
right,
energy?
Right,
Like,
so what are we even talking about at this point? You're just using different words for the same things. You know, like we all kind of know that there is like the high and the low. Like we have these kind of like higher desires, and then we have these lower desires. You know, like you have like the desire to be like a good person and protect your family and like do what's right and tell the truth. But then you also have like lower desires, you know what I mean? And like, so we all know that there are, whatever you want to call it, there are these forces of good and bad that act upon us. And it is true. I do think that there's something, it's one of the worst things about atheism, in my opinion, is that it almost like, it tells you to dismiss all of that. Now, I'm not saying strictly it has to. Like, you could be an atheist and still think about these things, but often, in effect, it has this effect of like, dismiss all this stuff you already know, it's all nonsense. And where previous generations who were much more connected to God and religion, their starting place was always to appreciate how beautiful this all is and how much bigger than you it is. And particularly today with like technological advances, it's just very easy to not appreciate that. You know, like I'm sure for a lot of people who are just alive today, you know, we take for granted things that we have that are really big deals, like heat and air conditioning. Like that's a crazy, almost conquering of nature, that I could sit in the middle of the hot summer in 69-degree weather because that's what I decided the thermostat goes to. And if I want it to be 66 when I sleep, then I change the weather to 66 degrees. You know, like that's a crazy power. It's surviving a winter used to be a thing. We don't feel that anymore. But if you were in that, if you don't have heat or air conditioning, then you immediately know that there's this much more powerful force than you, that you are just trying to live within, you know? And for modern people, I think sometimes something will happen to you. A family member gets sick. You lose someone, you know, like your parents die or something like that. And you're reminded that like, oh yeah, I'm this very small thing, and there's this much bigger force around me that I am powerless over, you know? But like that, I think that what Tucker's getting at there is that it's very easy for us today to pretend that's not the case. And then also, as you were getting, like all of the elite are pushing on us to believe that's not the case.
When we know they believe.
Yes,
yeah.
but also, and there's a huge, you know, look, the transgender thing is much bigger than just the transgender thing. And it's a huge part to what you had said before, the idea that that we are in control. So the first thing is that there's no God there. We are the gods. But then the point that you made before about like if we could get everyone to look at an apple and say it's a banana.
Right.
I mean, there's no question that that's like, isn't that just like a massive version of that? It's not just that they require, listen, I'm a radical libertarian. I believe adults ought to be free to do whatever they want to do. I don't, you know, like that is my starting point. Is like, I believe you own your body and you can do what you want with it. But that's not the trans demand. The trans demand isn't that you say adults have the right to do what they want to do. It's that's a woman. You must say that's a woman. That's the whole game here, is that we can get everybody to look at what you damn well know is not a woman and publicly profess that it is. And they almost got everyone to do it.
All right, guys, this episode is being sponsored by Nimi Skincare, my favorite skincare brand out there. Nimi has come to be known as America's skincare company because they formulate and manufacture all of their skincare products here in the USA. They also support pro-American causes and organizations. Nimi Skincare is true American luxury skincare, but their prices are affordable since they deliver directly to your door and they cut out the big box retailer middleman. Nimi has everything that you need to build an awesome daily skincare regimen to cleanse, brighten, protect, and help fight the key signs of aging. Are you ready to unlock your most youthful skin in years? Don't think twice, ladies. You will thank me later. Act now and head over to NimiSkincare.com. That's spelled Nimi skincare.com. Sign up for a subscription and you'll save 15% on your routine. And you'll save an additional 5% if you use code Candace at checkout. Plus, you'll receive a free gift on every third order. Another reason that I love Nimi is that they are a Christian-led company that stands firm in their values of faith, family, and freedom. They called out the nonsense at the Olympic ceremony last week that caused them to go viral on social media. So don't wait. If you aren't sure where to start, take their skincare quiz to find the perfect routine for your skin type. Nimi, that's America's skincare. Nimi Skincare is America's skincare company, so check them out today.
And literally, I mean, there are still people obviously who are changing their lives in this direction. It's like, what is that if not a demonic possession? And I think for me now, I look at things like psychology. And when I studied Sigmund Freud, it's really scary how every person that we learn about in school that they were a hero was actually a pervert. No, it's terrifying to us.
There's
They
a lot of that.
basically, what's happening in the public school system is an inversion. It's like you hated McCarthy. No. He knew what he was talking about. Communists were taking over the American government. You absolutely loved Sigmund Freud, this like psychology breakthrough. It's like, no, this is when they realized that they could just like use psychology to modify human behavior. Sigmund Freud, as a fact, I don't know if you know this, Sigmund Freud was a person who created psychoanalysis. This has got me in a lot of trouble with journalists a long time ago. And they, of course, they didn't debunk anything I said. They just called me anti-Semite because Sigmund Freud's Jewish. Like, who cares? Like, I didn't even mention who cares if he's Jewish, right? He created psychoanalysis because he had a bunch of women that were coming to him saying that they were being raped by their fathers. He was friends with their fathers, okay? And so he created psychoanalysis to convince them that their memories were wrong and they were actually attracted to their fathers, okay? Sigmund Freud was a homosexual man. He had a affair. One of these such fathers was his best friend. I'm
Big
blanking.
coke addict too, I think,
Yes,
right?
drugs as well. Hero in our textbooks, but his best friend Robert. I'm blanking on his last name, and I could actually probably look it up. He was another one of these men who, factually speaking, raped his son. His son spoke out about it, you know? So it's like, it's not like something we have to like imagine whether or not it was real. And the only reason we know this about Sigmund Freud as a fact is because this guy who graduated Harvard became one of the executives or had a role at the Sigmund Freud Archive Center, whatever it's called. And essentially he couldn't speak German. So he couldn't read anything at this archive place. So he decided to learn German, right? And so he starts reading the paperwork. I'm going to look up his name. He starts reading Sigmund Freud, finally understanding what he's writing, and then he's like, oh my gosh, no, Sigmund Freud created all of this to protect pedophiles. And so he like runs like, this is going to be amazing. Like I'm solving something that the world didn't know. He gets fired. They're like, you're not allowed to know that. This guy gets fired, gets his life ruined. This Harvard grad gets his life completely ruined. He gets attacked by the media because he's trying to tell the world that Sigmund Freud created psychoanalysis as a means to protect pedophiles. Wild that they're still protecting the secret, and they don't protect it in a way that like now, I guess I've said the thing, but they just attack you by being like, you can't talk about Sigmund Freud. And the same way they do this about Magnus Hirschfeld, who introduced transsexual. He was the first guy that like came up with like being transsexual. He was one of the fathers of transsexualism. And when you look into him, he was an awful guy. He
Was
was
he
an
like a Frankfurt
awful
school?
pervert. Yeah,
Or-
you know, they all were. He was like an
Yeah.
awful pervert. And it's like, why are we protecting so many people throughout history that were involved in really sinister, disgusting stuff? And not only are we protecting them, we are then reintroducing them as heroes. So if you look up Magnus Hirschfeld, he's introduced as a hero because now we're back at the trans stuff. If you look up Sigmund Freud, it's like this was the breakthrough in psychology. And it was like, no, this was the breakthrough, and that they realized that they could use psychology to trick you into accepting things that were purely devilish. Like Sigmund Freud is easily one of the worst contributors to our modern society. Like everyone should hate Sigmund Freud, and yet I graduated and thought this guy's who we should all want to be.
Well, even it's funny because even as Tucker like points to the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, if you go look at the greatest president ever, when they have those historian polls, it's always Truman. He's always the greatest. As
Murdering people. So
Henry
great.
Kissinger said, greatest president in American history was Truman. And they all have their rationale for it. But literally, there's like the guy who dropped nukes on cities is supposed to be considered. And by the way, this was like after the Nazis had already surrendered, after Adolf Hitler was already dead, after the war in Europe was over, and with 5-star General Dwight D. Eisenhower coming out against it. We don't need to do this because Japan's already willing to surrender. Like, we can negotiate a surrender with
them. They were already
We
negotiating.
don't have to do this. And he drops nukes on cities, and that's considered the best president.
And
Not a
look how
president who
even-
avoided wars.
Yeah, and they dropped it on praying Catholics. Like, they just wiped. Nagasaki was nothing. They dropped it 300 feet away from a cathedral. It makes me so angry because there's a lot of that going on where they were dropping it on Catholic cathedrals. But parking that aside, you look at people who I know are not neocons, and going back to that childhood trauma, they believe, we are taught in school that they had to drop the nuke. Again, justifying things that were horrific in the past by teaching a new generation of children that it was totally something that had to be done. So it's like, we actually committed a war crime, but we're going to tell you in your classroom that World War II wouldn't have ended unless we dropped that bomb on praying Catholics. What?
Yeah.
And then you still see people, like I said, who are not neocons, who will defend it radically because they are still harboring that belief. And I'm like, there is not a single objective truth to that. Like, I mean, even the amount of people they killed in one go, we were already firebombing Tokyo like 2 weeks prior and killed just as many people. This was about, we want to test out these nukes. We've spent so much money into this program. We have nothing to show for all the money we've spent. Hey, how about we drop this on this random place in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and then we'll use the propaganda say, well, this is now officially the war is over. It's like, no, the war was already over. The war was,
Well,
except for paperwork, the term sheet was done. Okay, we just needed to get it all formalized.
Yeah.
And it's sad that people are so removed from their humanity that we don't have the proper response in America to what it means to have a bomb dropped on you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, we have 9/11, and we lost our collective minds as a result of it, and went off and fought 7 wars over the next 20 years, and like, that's one of the points I try to make a lot when people talk about like how evil these Muslims are and how, how terrorist the Palestinians are. And it's like, hey, listen, just like before you go judging a whole group of people on these standards, just at least be fair here and go, look, like, we had one 9/11. And we responded this way. Imagine that was your whole life, like your entire life. It's like, it's not to say like, it doesn't mean like, oh, you're justifying Hamas or something like that. I'm just saying, at least think about this, okay? Those people in Hamas who broke out of Gaza on October 7th, almost all of them, I maybe there's an exception here, but I almost guarantee that every last one of them, that was their first time ever leaving Gaza. They had never been outside this 5-mile wide prison. You know what I mean? Like, just think about that for a second. Like, okay. Look, one of the things that's really interesting about this, right? Okay, so that clip that we just looked at, that was the most controversial moment of that podcast when Tucker came out against dropping nukes on cities. And you kind of have to ask yourself, okay, well, listen, why would that be the case? I mean, why would it be so like radioactive?
Because they're planning to do it again.
Question. Well, I mean, I think that the point you were making before, I mean, it cannot be overstated how much World War II is the origin story of the American empire, and how this is so, and like you said, not just neocons, this is like hardwired. It's been so deeply propagandized into people that they have to, I mean, if you start questioning World War II, that's like, yo, what are you doing? And I could question World War I, no reaction. We never should have fought World War I, which we shouldn't have fought, but we never should have fought World War I. We never should have fought whatever, any other war you could talk about. Vietnam, no problem. Iraq, obviously we shouldn't have fought Iraq, and everyone will admit this. But World War II is like a different thing. And I know, just to be clear here, because people are always like, are you implying that, like, I'm not implying anything.
Doesn't matter, they're going to write the article anyways.
Yeah, I don't care. But just for anyone who's honestly interested, like, no, I'm not implying that. Listen, part of the reason why World War II works as this like origin myth is because the Nazis and the Imperial Japanese are really good villains. Like, it's really easy to make them the villains because they were really, really evil regimes. But the point is that how many people today, when you're just talking, I mean, regular people I'm talking about, when you're just talking about the war in Gaza, is the first thing they go to. oh, we killed a whole lot of people in World War II. I mean, was that not justified? Right?
And
And the
I'm like,
answer already,
no.
but the answer already answers itself. They're not even asking the question. Obviously, that was just, well, the starting point is, well, that was justified, so why isn't this? I mean, Bobby Kennedy literally said this to me. When I'm talking to him about the Israel situation, he goes, listen, the Nazis, blah, blah, blah. You're like, wait, we're comparing Hamas to the Nazis? It just makes absolutely no sense. But the thing is like this. World War II, and by the way, if you haven't, and anyone listening to, you got to read Pat Buchanan's book on World War II. It's called Churchill, Hitler, and the Unnecessary War. Is like just an incredible book, because the real deal is that World War II is, objectively speaking, the worst thing that ever happened in the history of the world. That's what it is. It's the worst thing. The biggest mass murder campaign in human history, destroyed Europe, the foundation of Western civilization, just absolutely destroyed. Tens and tens and tens of millions of people just all lost their lives. And the truth is, and if you go read Pat Buchanan's book, you see this. There were off-ramps all over the place, like in the whole lead up to the war. It's like, we could have gotten off here, we could have gotten off here, we could. And the only lesson from history that you're ever allowed to learn, which they will say to you all the time, is what? Is appeasement. Oh, you're Neville Chamberlain. You ever don't want to fight a war? You're Neville Chamberlain. Oh, look at you, appeasing. You probably would have wanted to appease Adolf Hitler. Oh, you don't want to fight a proxy war in Ukraine against Vladimir Putin? You're Chamberlain. You would have appeased Hitler. You would have given him Yugoslavia. It's like, oh, you don't want to fight a war in Iraq? Chamberlain. Like, this is the only lesson you're supposed to learn.
That's why whenever somebody wants to call you evil, the first thing they say is Adolf Hitler. Like he's the only person that's been put in the American mindset as a reference point. When you want to call somebody, it's like, oh, she's literally Hitler. And I have felt that heat since doing the show, because I've introduced other facts about World War II that Americans don't know. So I shared the documentary, which I said everyone should watch this as a baseline, because it threw me for a loop, and I realized how severely propagandized it was about World War II. That's, again, not to say that I'm saying the Nazis were good people, but it might also be something that Americans should know, is that after the war had ended, BBC's documentary, The Savage Peace, we went after people who were not Nazis. We went after people who were not even Germans. They were just German speaking. We just went after these innocent civilians, lined up their children, shot them, ran over their legs for the crime of them speaking German. Okay? That is wild. And it's an important thing for you to understand, because if that is how we behaved in peacetime, 12 million German speaking civilians who were ethnically cleansed, if you find a single person that is trying to justify that by saying their stupid phrases that neocons say, well, you know, war is hell. Shut up. Just shut up right now. Because just know that
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that's my favorite argument.
Well, you
war
know,
is hell.
when they've lost everything else, when they have no moral arguments, then they're just like, you're like, hey, this like 4-year-old got shot for no reason. They're like, war is hell.
No, actually, I'm quite comfortable. I love that argument. It goes, okay, so war is hell. That's right. So I'm glad we've established that you are pro-hell.
Yeah.
And I am anti-hell.
Yeah, I'm anti-hell.
So yes,
that's
okay.
my problem.
So
And
there
they
we
make
go.
it seem like we're the monsters. And I'm like, it's important. And the amount of people that have reached out to me, it's so sad. Because think about this. This happened to people for the crime of speaking German. They had nothing to do with Nazis, didn't vote for. Not even the majority of Germans voted for Adolf Hitler, obviously.
Right.
And I think it was like, what, 30%? And then he was like installed, essentially. But the point being is that you had these people who had lived on that land forever, ethnically cleansed, 12 million people. And when I saw it, how horrific what was done to them, because there was actually footage. And it's so shocking. And then I had people reaching out to me from Germany saying, like, thank you so much for covering this, because we're not even allowed to talk about it, because then they passed speech laws. So if you said anything that stepped outside of the bounds of the World War II established narrative, right? Allies good always, no matter what, even after the war when we were ethnically, we let Stalin just go in there and rape a bunch of women.
Yeah, Stalin, the Soviet Union and the British Empire, the forces for good in the world.
Well, that even makes sense. Like, objectively, I'm like, wait a second, Stalin, what are we talking about? He was like mass murdering Christians. And I never even questioned that when I was growing up, because again, we've been so removed from our Christian faith, we don't even think about it, because who was doing the World War propaganda? Who was running the government? Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays, they established for the first time ever a propaganda arm in our government. And Edward Bernays was running the program to basically psychologically convince us to only go Nazi bad, Nazi bad, Nazi bad, inspiring us to sign up to kill some Nazis. We stopped seeing each other as Christians. We stopped seeing each other as like human beings. The part was like, you no longer need to think of German civilians, these Czechoslovakian civilians, as civilians anymore because it's everything we do now is
Yeah.
about killing Nazis. So what we did in Dresden, an objective war crime, and any person that says otherwise is a monster, and stop listening to them. Like incinerating Catholics on the eve of they're running around and you've got ash on your forehead, like on the eve of Ash Wednesday, they incinerated Catholics, like a sick joke, right? And you look at that and all through the day of Ash Wednesday, and you have people that will try to justify that. Like Dresden was not a city that needed to be firebombed at all. So when you look at that and you hear people say that, and still today we carry that same propaganda, Nazi bad, so no matter what we did, even if we had to rape and kill children and women, which we did, we allowed Stalin's men to do that, it's all acceptable because war is hell.
Yeah.
Dave, I just wanted to let you know something. War is hell.
Oh, well, it's like, oh, I guess the argument's over then. Yeah, you're right. Well, then then it's okay, I guess. Well, there's by the way, you should, if you ever seen Hitler Lives?
No.
Okay, so Hitler Lives is a piece of American propaganda in the wake of World War II. It was written by Dr. Seuss. It is like straight up like this is what the propaganda at the time was. And so in the immediate wake of World War II, one of the things that's interesting is that they do not mention the Holocaust or Jews. That doesn't even come up because that was not even a part. The whole thing is about what an evil race the German people are and how we better keep our eyes on them because they already did this twice and they're gonna do this again. So keep your eyes on these like filthy Germans.
Well, that's what they don't like. Well, if you tell the story of what was said about the Germans leading up to this, they don't like this. So there was an entire book written about how they needed to ethnically cleanse the Germans before World War II. It was written by a man named Theodor Kaufmann. And I want to get the exact name of that book correctly because God forbid this gets taken out of context and suddenly I'm like, you know, whatever. They're going to write the articles anyways. But what it was called,
oh, yeah,
like,
you're screwed.
Oh, I'm screwed no matter what. So it's cool. I was actually happy because they went through everything so quickly on like the first month of my show. There's really nothing less to say. They got to like accuse me of like touching a girl's butt 10 years ago now. Like they've thrown everything at me. They're like, you know.
Did you touch a girl's butt 10 years ago, Candace?
That will come out eventually. Give them 2 weeks and they'll line up the girls and Lisa, whatever her name is, Lisa Bloom will be representing them. That's all they got left now. So they kind of came at me with full bullets. I'm like, okay, I think I'm good now. They've called me everything. Like
I'm going to jump ship.
Self-hating
I'm gonna
black
Me Too
person.
you.
Yeah,
I'm going to be the
that's
first
all that's
guy
left.
to come on here.
It was called
Candace created a hostile environment for
yeah,
me.
Germany Must Perish. It was a 104-page book written by Theodor Kaufmann, which he self-published in 1941 in the United States. So nobody talks about like that. And I'm not, by the way, again, just to be clear here, I am not alleging that the Nazis were good, but I'm saying that we are told such a small snippet of what happened leading up to it. It was just like, you know.
Well, so Pat Buchanan's thesis in his book is essentially that the Holocaust was...
Wait, hold on. I want to pause before you tell me about his thesis because I want to read this thing.
Sure.
Because I just saw it. The book advocated genocide through the sterilization of all Germans and territorial dismemberment of Germany, believing that this would achieve world peace. Published in the United States in 1941. So I'm just saying, like, if you're a German civilian reading that might have been interesting to you, like leading up to, like whatever.
Well,
but,
sure.
Go ahead, because I want you to hear about Buchanan's
Pat
thesis.
Buchanan, who, by the way, like if he's lost on like the younger generation, like everybody should go read Pat Buchanan. I mean, Pat Buchanan is just like the most brilliant conservative thinker of, or at least up there of the 20th and 21st century. I mean, he was truly like the precursor to Donald Trump, but so, you know, without the pizzazz and the wealth and the brashness, but with like so much knowledge of history, and his books are fantastic. I mean, all of his books are great. But essentially his thesis on World War II, and by the way, if you look at the title, it's Churchill, Hitler, and the Unnecessary War, and unnecessary war is in quotes, because that was a Churchill quote. It was what Churchill referred to the war as after the war. But his argument essentially was that, look, the Holocaust was a war crime, and that this happened in the context of a war. And if you could have avoided the war, you could have avoided the genocide. So his whole argument is that it's not like Nazis good. It's like, no, they're very bad. But his argument is that there were so many off-ramps to leading up to this conflict. And essentially that what the real battle came down to over, right, was after Czechoslovakia, was that they wanted Danzig. That they wanted this German-speaking town in Poland, which had historically been part of Germany. And that essentially we were like, no, we won't get, because we learned our lesson, you know, with the appeasement, so we're going to be tough and we'll go to war over Poland. and that and then at the end of the war, Poland's handed to the commies,
Right.
who ruled over them for another 6 decades or whatever, or whatever it was after that, another several decades, and then 4 decades after, or 5, whatever. So the point is that it's like we could have there were so many options where we could have avoided this whole thing. And look, maybe you disagree with his thesis on the book or whatever, but to just think about World War II as the worst thing that ever happened, and the only thing we're allowed to do in hindsight is celebrate it.
Right.
And how great it was.
It's sick.
Instead
It's totally
of thinking
sick.
of like, oh my God, the only thing you should be thinking is how could we have possibly avoided this? How could we possibly avoid this going
And that would
forward?
that would be allowing us to objectively study it, and that's part of the reason, like I said, they hate me right now, because I'm going, no, guys, this is an incredibly important moment. Like, World War II did change everything. It
Yeah.
changed everything in the entire world, and I don't think for the better, by the way. So I'm not saying that it's not a good thing that America won. I'm saying that when you look at America today and we realize, like, has America objectively gotten better since World War II?
Yeah.
Like, we've gone into all of these alliances overseas, things that have been problematic, right? Like what NATO is doing now, it's all about, oh well, World War II. They always go back to this World
Always,
War II, and that's why
always.
we're doing this, and that. And NATO's got to protect the borders. It's like, what are you talking about? Like you're totally encroaching into Putin's territory while accusing him of encroaching into it. It's a madness, honestly.
Well,
it's
first of
almost like
all-
psychopathic.
Well, look, even if I'm wrong about everything I just said about World War II, like let's just say the official narrative is 100% correct. It goes, it's still only one lesson from history.
And
But it's
are we
like,
allowed to
that's
talk
supposed to
about it?
apply to every other. The only lesson in history is like when appeasement went wrong. Like, so you're saying has aggression never gone wrong?
Right.
Has like starting a war never gone wrong? In the last 20 years, I could give you quite a few examples of it. And look, man, I mean, the stuff with Vladimir Putin is just, I know we talked a little bit about this last time I was on the show, but it's just so absurd that you would go like, look, whatever you think about Vladimir Putin, he's certainly got a lot of flaws, and I'm not trying to live in Russia, and I don't particularly like the Russian model. I like the old school American model, pre-Woodrow Wilson. But, the idea that, first of all, we led a coup in Ukraine to overthrow Yanukovych because he had decided to do an economic partnership with Vladimir Putin rather than the EU. I mean, just imagine.
Yeah.
Just imagine.
But they don't even
if you
know
had,
it. People don't even know this because the
yeah.
media keeps Americans dumb, deluded, and stupid. And so it's always back to like World War II. Like that's people
Yeah.
just go back to the Cold War. But
Well,
Russia bad. They're supposed to just be reactive.
just
So
for
what you're
people-
talking about, what people, Americans watching are going, well, what do you mean we staged a coup? Most people didn't even know that we staged
Yes.
a coup.
So it
and
happened-
they
this
freaked
was in,
out when I was reading Vladimir Putin's speeches. I want people to actually be educated. I'm not saying I know everything, but I'm telling you that we have been intentionally taught nothing. Okay,
Well,
literally nothing. No context, nothing more told to you other than this person bad. We're like monkeys. It's like this person really bad, this person really good. There is nothing else that you need to know other than this evil, this is objective goodness, and that's the end. And I'm like, you cannot objectively take a look at what we did in that region, both in Ukraine and what we have been doing in that region in Ukraine, and go, Putin had no reason whatsoever to be upset unless you're just like a chronic abuser and a psychopath. Yeah.
Unprovoked.
Totally
Oh, by the way,
unprovoked.
I should, by the way, give this a plug because I just got an advance copy and read it. But a good friend of mine, Scott Horton, who you got to talk to Scott
Okay.
Horton. He's like the best on war, the best voice on war in the country. But he's writing a book called Provoked, and it's so good. It's
Love
so
that.
good. It just goes through the whole history, basically from the collapse of the Soviet Union up to Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine and the whole history of it. But I'll say Jeffrey Sachs was on Tucker Carlson's show like last month, and the way he put it was great because it's like if you look at what's known as the Maidan Revolution in 2014, I mean, there's a lot of, first off, the National Endowment for Democracy and the USAID are just pouring millions of dollars into it. And the Soros NGOs are the ones who got the protesters out onto the street. Like, it's so clearly a US regime change.
100%.
But on top of that, you have Victoria Nuland and John McCain and Senator Murphy and a couple others who are all in the middle of the protest with them saying, we're with you the whole way. They're handing out food and water. And what Jeffrey Sachs said, which I thought was great, I didn't think of this, but I'm glad he did. He's more clever than me. But he goes, just imagine if on January 6th, you had a bunch of high-ranking Chinese officials who were there with the protesters saying, we have your back. We're with you. You know, take down this government. I mean, could you imagine
That's
what the response to that
what
would have
happened
been?
in Ukraine. For
So
everybody
that's
listening
literally
to this,
what the
that's
U.S.
literally
did.
what we did in Ukraine. So if you think that Putin had no reason,
So imagine that's going on in Mexico,
yeah,
right?
on your border.
So imagine in Mexico that we come up with like and however we got there, I mean, yeah, we put our thumb on the scale, but we get a trade deal going with Mexico. You know, they were thinking about doing a trade deal with the Chinese or something like that, but we convinced them, well, you trade with the Chinese, you won't be able to trade with us, but we'll give you a big generous loan if you sign this trade deal with us. And they go, okay, we'll sign a trade deal with that. And then China comes in and overthrows that government and installs a government who wants to take a deal with China. And then a civil war breaks out. And then they start flooding arms in to the Civil War. What do you think D.C. would do? They'd back off? They'd go, well, I guess that's Chinese territory now down there in Mexico.
That's classic American
come on.
gaslighting. It
Yeah.
makes me sick. It's like we have done so much to so many people around the world, like since the beginning of time. And when you start trying to interject that into the American conscience, because now I'm telling people all this information because I'm trying to stop another war from happening because people don't have any information, because they really do believe that when they see Ukraine trending and a bunch of people putting like the blue and yellow flag up, that must mean Ukraine good. Like that is where the American mindset is right now. And they are intentionally, like I am telling you, the public school system, the public education system was passed through, was federalized with the intention to make American students dumber and dumber and dumber objectively, more emotional, but objectively dumber, which is a fact right now, which is why one of the most brilliant things that I think Matt Walsh did, or he spoke about on his show, he just challenged people to go read a letter from a Civil War soldier writing to his mom who had no educational training whatsoever. And it sounds like poetry, right? And then you go find someone who just graduated university with like a 3.7 like GPA and just read how they write and how they speak. And you will recognize we are becoming dumber and dumber. Objectively, the SATs, they're getting rid of honors classes. They don't even want people to know they're getting dumber. In fact, they're convincing them they're smarter. The great paradox is while we are objectively getting dumber in terms of mathematics, in terms of the English language, we are at the same time giving out more degrees than ever before. So we're inflating people's egos while they're becoming legitimately more retarded. And I'm using that as like not as an insult to
the literal definition of the
retarded.
word.
So we are slowing people down. And I see that is intentional. I see how evil, how Machiavellian it is. And when you see these kids and they're enraged and they're fighting for trans rights, somewhere in the back, the evil cabal, which I very much believe there is a cabal that is running the government, and by another name would be the CIA, it would be all of these intelligence agencies that are linked to each other around the world. When that evil cabal is just laughing because you have no information. So they know eventually, right now, covered this on my show, 40% of kids can't pass a basic literacy exam in America. So eventually, your reality will be what we tell you. So when we say, this is what happened, you won't be able to read what went down in 2014 in Ukraine. Putin is the bad guy. He's going to kill you. He has nukes. You'll be signing up to go to a war and to go die overseas. That is what is happening. You have to wake up to that. You need to actually become educated. Make sure your kids can learn how to read and know that everything they're telling you, they're lying to you about what's happening presently. Can you imagine how much we are being lied to about what happened in the past?
When they could get away with so much more.
Are you overwhelmed with back taxes or struggling with unfiled returns? With 20,000 new hires, the IRS has stepped up enforcement since the end of COVID relief programs, issuing millions of pay-up notices in 2024. If you're worried about IRS collection tactics, there's no need to face them alone. Tax Network USA can help you. Tax Network USA is the nation's premier tax relief firm with a history of negotiating over $1 billion in tax relief for clients. They offer a range of services, including penalty forgiveness, hardship programs, where you might not have to repay anything until your tax debt expires. And they even offer in-compromise solutions for lump sum settlements. So whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, their team of experts is prepared to assist you. Even if you're behind on your taxes due to missing personal or business records, Tax Network USA can guide you through the process of catching up. Listen, tax season is over. And for the IRS, that means that collection season has begun. So contact Tax Network USA for personalized support with your tax issues. Handling IRS matters without professional help is risky. Protect your financial security by seeking guidance from Tax Network USA. Their experts provide strategic advice on reducing or eliminating your tax debt. To schedule a complimentary consultation, call 1-800-245-6000 or visit tnusa.com/Candace. Don't let the IRS's aggressive tactics control your life. Empower yourself with Tax Network USA support and take charge of your financial future. Visit tnusa.com/Candace.
You're totally right, though, about the thing about dumbing down of Americans. I mean, I remember seeing recently, and this was at the Columbia protests over, Free Palestine protests or whatever, which is, as if people know me, is an issue I'm fairly sympathetic to them on. Like, I'm totally against this war and they're protesting against the war. But I mean, they're going around like interviewing Columbia students there. And I just was blown away by how stupid all of them sound. I mean, it's like, this isn't even just like a college. This is like an Ivy League college. You would think like people protesting a war at an Ivy League college have probably read a couple books about it, you know what I mean, and know what they're talking about. And just the way they speak and how ignorant they are of the whole thing, it's really, it was jarring to see. And yet my grandfather, who worked in a factory and never even thought about going to college, him and all his friends who worked at factories were all way smarter than this. They knew things in the world. They read books and they knew what was going on in the world around them. And it's Matt Walsh is totally right about that. There's been, and your point I think is really, really important, can't be overstated enough, that also at the same time, that person, that kid there is like, I go to Columbia. And I'm getting this piece of paper that means something. And so they have this crazy inflated sense of self that they're like a really smart person, where it's like, you're dumber than an average factory worker from a couple generations ago.
You're not smart, kid. In fact, you're so dumb because at least that person knew how to survive. Then you couple that with the fact that the majority of these people, and I am convinced, and this is not a conspiracy theory, this is what I tell people every day, okay? They are recreating slavery. Right? And it's like a magic trick. When you actually study slavery and you go, how is this allowed to happen? The one thing that every slave civilization has in common is there were more slaves than masters. Okay, how? Why didn't you revolt?
Right.
It's the China equation. Well, one of the things that they made sure of is that slaves were not allowed to learn how to read, right? Because an educated mind, generally speaking, can't be enslaved, right? So when you actually know stuff and you're going, okay, well, actually, this doesn't actually make sense. There's more of us, whatever it is. The breakdown of family was also so important to that, because usually a lot of your wisdom comes from having a strong family. You know what I mean? And when people's families are just in complete chaos, this is why
not just wisdom,
communism hated it.
Not just wisdom, but self-reliance. Your family takes care of you, so you're not dependent on somebody else,
And the majority of kids today, forget the fact that they know nothing and they're convinced that they know everything. They can't survive. So I'm not kidding when I say this, and I made this because I realized that little elements make you a slave. Not know how to grow food. Okay, so I realized this, moved to Tennessee, and had a woman that was helping us. She's got 22 grandchildren. And I realized, I don't know how to grow food. How weird. We lost this knowledge. My grandparents knew how to grow food. My grandparents knew how to hunt. And they know all these things. We are being convinced that we're becoming more progressive, right? Quite literally, if they turn the lights off. During COVID, I'm like, if they just took down the electricity for 2 weeks, everyone in New York City would die, okay? Because they think food comes out of a grocery store. They're so noble, they don't know how to shoot a gun, right? They don't know how to hunt. So I became obsessed. I became almost apocalyptic about this stuff. I learned how to grow vegetables. It was shocking. I was so stupid that day, Dave. I gotta tell you, this woman took me outside, Helen, and I got the seeds. I went to Home Depot, I got the seeds. I'm like, now what do I do? she's like, you put them in the dirt and you see what happens. And it was just this amazing moment where I realized I, in that regard, was a welfare recipient without even realizing. I thought grocery, that it all just happened at a grocery store. Guys, what if that's not there? How are you going to survive? I want you to think like this. Actually, how would you survive? Because your grandparents, if you're my age, most of you don't have your grandparents around. They had that wisdom. They were smarter than you just on the basis that they knew how to survive, okay? Mm-hmm. They could go outside and they could grow things. They, knew something about hunting, so I learned how to hunt, not because I want to be this huntess, this amazing huntess, but because I do believe that having basic survival skills is something that has been intentionally wiped from the American mindset. Do you know how to change a tire? Most kids, college educated kids, if you were car broke down on the side of the road, all you got to do is take that spare, and they don't know how to do it. They literally think they just have to call someone else. That's a scary thing, not to know how to survive.
And also not being totally unaware that they don't know any of those things, and having no gratitude at all for the people who do know those things, which is the reason why you're able to survive.
Right.
They're
backwards,
that's
they're
the
stupid,
worst, yes,
they're uneducated.
That's the worst thing about progressive.
Nerds.
Yes,
I like lattes. I shouldn't say that.
Sure, but the worst thing about elite progressives to me is that it's the lack of humility and the lack of gratitude for those who are lower than them on the socioeconomic, ladder. That it's kind of, there's this intense judgment of all those, like you said, those are the backward racists with their religion and it's like everything's looking down on those people as you sit here in this like building that was built by blue collar men, that with air conditioning that was built by blue collar men, you know what I mean, with like literally every inch of this. You walked on a road that was paved by a working class man, and then you sit there and get to talk about whatever dumb new theory, you know what I mean, that is like totally couldn't survive in the outside world at all, like some like thing about whatever, queer theory or whatever you're learning, and you get to sit there and feel better than all of those people.
And that's the thing, is like when you look at the situation in Gaza, and when you kind of one of the people that really illustrated it for me, because I was ignorant, I didn't know anything, and I genuinely and I hope people knew that it was genuine. I don't want to speak about things if I don't know them, and I will tell you that I don't know them. But when you kind of gave me even that situation, and I'm like, this really all comes down to survival. And we've kind of gotten into this place because we have not had war on our soil. I mean, you could say like the Civil War and the Revolutionary War, but I mean like within recent, it's been a long time. So we don't actually know what it means to be forced to have to survive, right? And we are so privileged. We've been so privileged for so long. And it scares me because eventually the pendulum is going to have to swing. And let me tell you that if that pendulum does swing, because we're making a lot of enemies, right? If that pendulum does swing, all of those backwards, racist Southern people that the media detests so much are going to be the first people that are hit up. So I play this game with my husband too, where we're like, let's just play apocalypse. Like, who are we allowing onto the farm? You got to have a skill set to come into our house. And I'm like, that girl, I mean, I guess she could be entertainment. Like, we could feed her. I'm like, but like, do you know how to sew? Like, what is your actual skill set that if things went down, I'm letting you into my tribe? And so that's how I judge everybody now. I'm like, I don't know if I would have you. I don't know. I don't know yet if I would have. You're funny. I will say that. You're also really smart. You do need someone you have time. But I just like, do you sew? Like
my wife will cover a lot of those bases for you. She gardens.
Okay, she's in. She's in.
She'd
and
be
you
good.
can, and we talked about that. We were like, would we make them divorce? Would we take them both? We talked about that phase of things where when you're building your tribe and you're like, hey, he doesn't know anything, but his wife knows everything. Do we force her to get divorced so she can come in?
She's really attached to me. You're gonna have to work. You're gonna have to work.
All
pretty
right,
hard
we'll
on that
take you
one.
both. We'll take you both into our apocalyptic tribe. But I say this like half jokingly because I think that we are becoming dumber and dumber and dumber. We have no real skills anymore. And you think
no, there's no question about that, and that's part of the danger.
Most women don't even know how to cook, and they think it's like a sign of status because the Hollywood people, they'll show these like feminists being like, I don't even know how to cook. Like I don't even know how to boil water. And I'm like, not in my tribe.
Oh, good luck getting in one of these tribes. I've got a few competing ones that I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna be calling Rogan's survivalist tribe. I'm gonna be honest, I might go with Rogan on this one.
Yeah.
He's gonna be like, he's like jujitsu, hunting elk
fight.
and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And by the way, like jujitsu doesn't really help. You gotta be able to shoot because like if somebody's
he
got a
can do all
weapon.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. No, he's good. Okay. He's good. No, but I think I mean there is, and it's not even just, what if some apocalyptic thing happens, which also is a concern. I mean, we've been through some pretty unstable years over the last few years in America, and it does make you wonder, especially because I think also that as most people know, even if they don't really like intellectually know this, they do kind of know to some degree that like, American dominance is all a house of cards, right? That like none of this is real. Like it was at one point. Like America did become the richest country in the world because our productive capacity was so much greater than the rest of the world. That was why we were once like the economic envy of the world. But it's not anymore. Now it's just over military dominance and exporting paper money. You know what I mean? And that's not very sustainable, or at least that could collapse. You know what I mean? If you can't militarily dominate the world anymore. But also I do just think it's very bad. It's bad for your soul to be that removed from reality, to be that removed from nature, and also just to like have contempt for your fellow people because they're not as privileged as you. It's weirdly, while the progressives are like obsessed with privilege. And like that never came up. That never like entered into your equation, that there's like, okay, you're at an elite university and there's an entire working class. You're privileged above them. You know, like, and you're supposed to know that. Like, you're supposed to know that. That should come with some obligations. That should come with some feeling of gratitude. Like, there's nothing wrong with being in the elite. You need an elite. Every society has an elite. That's the nature of humans. Like, we form hierarchies. We're always going to, no matter how much you fight against that. Even the commies had you could argue, the most severe hierarchies in like communism. But just being totally removed and almost pretending none of that exists. This is the thing that's so devastating about it, is that you have today, like, you have kids at an elite college university, at an Ivy League university, who genuinely, like, they could pass a lie detector test. They'll go like, well, I'm non-binary, so I'm really like an oppressed minority.
Yeah. Yeah,
You're like,
they're
you
stupid.
are an oppressed minority?
They're so dumb.
Get out of here.
I thank goodness, and it's funny because that's all they have is like their stupid, meaningless degrees.
Yeah.
Like when they try to insult me because my family quite literally couldn't afford when Sally Mae had the collapse. My family didn't have money to go to college. Like I had to drop out of the University of Rhode Island because I couldn't pay $35,000 a year. And they're like, ha 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 ha. Like they loved calling me that for the longest time. Like she's just a college dropout. And I'm like, what does your degree? You can't survive. You literally don't know how to survive. You have resentment toward the blue collar worker. And I believe, by the way, this gets into what you were saying before we started, which I want you to say now, how you were illustrating why they really don't like the populist people. Well, the blue collar worker is actually a guard against governance. Like I actually think the government deeply resents the blue collar worker for a reason. And you kind of said it way more eloquently, so I'd like you to restate it.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about, there's this piece that Murray Rothbard wrote, who's like a brilliant mind. To me, like the most brilliant political thinker of the 20th century. And he wrote this piece. It was kind of one of the most controversial pieces, maybe the most controversial piece he ever wrote. And I don't think it should be. I think it's a really great piece. It was really brilliant. But he was writing about David Duke, who ran for governor in the 90s, and how he was writing about how the whole establishment freaked out when he ran. And if you could imagine, it was, he was running for governor, but it was kind of, if you could imagine the way people freak out about Trump, it was kind of like that type of freak out, where the entire establishment was brought in to crush this guy, and including the Republican establishment, the Democratic establishment, the entire corporate media. And of course, David Duke, to most people today, I think all they know him of is you're like the racist guy.
I know nothing about him.
Like literally,
Yeah.
I don't know much about him.
He's a white supremacist, racist, and you're supposed to bring him up like you bring off Adolf Hitler.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but at this point, he had been polling pretty well, and then they really moved in to crush him. And what Rothbard was writing about was like, he was like, well, look, why is it that this guy freaked out the whole system? His exact words were, he sure did scare the bejesus out of him. And what he was kind of talking about how, like, okay, well, you could say it's because he used to be in the Klan when he was in his 20s. Except the problem with that is that you got like Byrd in the Senate and like all these other people. They were also Klansmen, and there are all these, and no one has a problem with them. They're like totally accepted. And he goes through it and he's like, well, really, what it is it's that the regime freaks out over right-wing populism. And this, I think, really is a huge component to understanding why they hate Donald Trump so much. Because if you really think about it, Donald Trump, first off, he's as American as apple pie. It's Donald Trump. He literally, my entire childhood, he was the stand-in for rich guy. You know what I mean? Like if someone was like, lunch is on you, you're like, what am I, Donald Trump? That was just like he was the most American figure ever, beloved by Hollywood and the establishment and all of that.
Hip-hop world, everybody.
Yes, everybody. He was the guy, the big gold letters,
Symbol
Trump.
of status,
yes. And he really, if you look at, say, like the 4 years he was in there, he did a couple good things around the edges. He did some very bad things, but he was no real threat to the establishment. It's not like the military-industrial complex wasn't making their profits anymore because Donald Trump was in there. The big banks had a real rough 4 years. It's like, no, business as usual went on. Obviously, he's very bombastic rhetorically, but what really, I think, freaks them out about Donald Trump is that he's leading a right-wing populist movement. And that scares the elite in a way that left-wing populism never will. Like, left-wing populism, they're not necessarily a fan of it. I mean, look, they rigged the Democratic primaries against Bernie Sanders. They weren't about to let him be the nominee. He's pointing the finger at billionaires and big banks, and turns out billionaires and big banks have a lot of power. They don't like that so much. You know what I mean? So, it's not that they love communism or socialism, but what is Bernie Sanders really leading a movement of? I mean, the people. Who were they? A bunch of male feminists on college campus? What are they going to do? Are they really going to? But who is Donald Trump leading a movement of? Every barrel-chested man in America loves Donald Trump. Every tough, like, dude that has a shotgun loves Donald Trump. They don't like people like that. It's part of the same reason they don't like Alex Jones. You know, it's like that movement is something dangerous to them. And that's one of the reasons why they crack down on this. And it's can also be explained like why masculinity in general is under such attack. You know what I mean? They don't like tough men. That's never part of the game.
Interrupting briefly here to speak to you if you are somebody that feels that you are taking a step back every month instead of moving forward. When the bills are higher than ever, what you bring in every month feels like it just instantly leaves when you have to swipe that credit card to cover the difference, and the debt just keeps adding up. But if you own a home, my friends at American Financing can help you. You can break free from that cycle. American Financing is saving people just like you an average of $854 a month. Think about what you could do with an extra $800 every month and not having to worry about those minimum monthly payments. Even better, it costs nothing to find out how much money you could be saving. All it takes is a quick call to American Financing, and if you start today, you may be able to delay 2 mortgage payments. So call American Financing today and start your journey towards being credit card debt-free. 800-795-1210 is the number to call. That's 800-795-1210. Or you can visit americanfinancing.net/Owens.
This is one of the things that I speak about with like the Andrew and Tristan Tate phenomenon.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, okay, like I'm not a person that would ever defend the pornography industry that they were involved. But when I looked up and I saw like the entire world coming after these two brothers, I was going, okay, what is this actually about? And then I started watching his videos and I was like, oh, okay, so he's talking like old school masculinity, like, you know, and he's saying stuff that's like as if like the matriarchy, which I believe that we're actually existing under, time to be like step aside, bitchs, you know, after you guys have been saying all this stuff and men have been subjugated, they're saying the exact opposite. They're like, F that bitch, like this is not even a girl that you want to marry. And the mass freak out was really because what the establishment fears is real men. It feels real men that will rise up and say, you know what, actually, I will defend my wife, I will defend my kids if it really comes down to it. They don't want that. That's why they want to rip apart families, because it allows them to have more power. That's why they're pushing these agendas, the trans agenda and, you know, homosexuality. They're trying to mainstream all this because it disrupts the nuclear family. The nuclear family, and everyone knew this, Karl Marx wrote about this extensively, is a threat to government omnipotence. If you want to be a government, you want to be omnipotent, you have to radically tear apart the family in every means that you can. Essentially redefine what it even means to be a family. Oh, you're a woman who identifies as a fish. Well, you can get married to another woman who identifies as a tiger, and you can go get your kids. You're going to turn to the government, and we're going to tell you how you can get some IVF children. Like, let's just disrupt what it means to be a normal, natural, biological family.
Yeah. Well,
like,
look,
that's
from
the war.
every inch of statism, like every inch of the government, take whatever, you know, like you could pick anything. Take Social Security. And it's like, okay, well, what was Social Security before there was Social Security? It's like, well, that was your family.
Yeah, your family,
you know,
was
your
security.
family. Like the idea was like you took care of your kids when they were young and helpless, and then when you were old and helpless, they would take care of you. That was kind of the trade-off there, right? If you think about so before public schools, who was doing the teaching? Well, it was the family, or it was the community, it was the church, you know? If you think about even like the way people kind of like very weirdly worship political figures, you know, I think during COVID, like if you remember the treatment, the Cuomo-sexual
The signs
stuff,
for Fauci
the
in the
Fauci
yard.
things, yeah, there's like very weird. It's like, okay, so who at every inch of this, you see like, hey, who's government's competition? The family, the community, the church.
Yeah.
That's their competition. That's
Tale
who
as
they're
old
in
as time.
business against. So why now we go. Well, why is it that all of the halls of power are constantly demonizing the family, masculinity, the community, religion, you know, like all the things that are in competition with government? I mean, and the more like totalitarian that states become, the more necessary it is to squash all of those things. I mean, in fact, you can't have them because it's just, look, people who have strong families, which are, you know, okay, as everybody knows, always led by strong masculinity. I mean, that's the way you have strong families. They don't really exist without that, okay? So without strong men and strong family, people who have those strong families are independent. They don't need to be dependent on the government. The government relies on you being dependent on them. And in terms of like organized religion, there's look, it's just all of those people, right, who you say, who are putting Fauci, worshiping Fauci as a god or worshiping Andrew Cuomo or whoever it might be. None of them were devout religious
No.
people. Because devout religious people don't worship other people. That's like one characteristic that they have, because they already have their God. They're not looking for another God to worship. You know what I mean? And in fact, almost every single religion, almost every one, like in the first commandment is almost always, don't worship things that aren't God. You only worship God. That's what makes him God. And if you're worshiping something else like it's God, whether that's yourself or another person or just a symbol, that's blasphemy. Because you're not supposed, and so there's something that is deeply powerful in that, like even if you're not religious, even just like from an atheist perspective, there's something powerful about that because it robs would-be tyrants of their ability to put themselves forward as a god, which, by the way, they always do.
Right, and
They
that's the
always
reason
do.
why in these communist societies they didn't allow faith. They
Yeah,
basically
that's
said
right.
you're not allowed to be faithful because they wanted your only faith to be government. And that's one of the things. I actually don't believe in atheism. I think you just transfer your faith into something else, and usually that thing is man, right? And you see that happen so often with people that are not faithful. They are they believe in man, and I saw that with Sam Harris. I had the dweebiest conversation with him ever during COVID. He like attacked me for like going outside publicly, and I was like, dude, you sound unhinged. And literally he sounded like he was in a bunker. Like Dave Rubin got me to get on the phone with him. He's like, you two are both my friends, like just speak through this. And when I got on the phone with him, he was just like, you don't understand, it's gonna be gurneys in the street, like I'm keeping my like family inside, we're not going anywhere. And I listened to him like out of respect, but then I hung up the phone and I turned to my husband. I was literally about to go into an event and shake hands. I was like, that man is like literally insane. He's insane, but he's an atheist. So actually,
Yes,
there's
but
if you believe that this is
seems
it,
pretty religious.
right? This is it. This is it. There's nothing more to life but you living on this earth. You will worship whatever is created to give you one more day on this earth, and that is what Sam Harris became. So mask up, social distancing.
That's right.
These are your new sacraments. Dr. Fauci is your God. You're not an atheist, bro.
No.
Okay,
Look,
you're a humanist. Like you believe in humans so much that are going to rescue you and keep you alive. That actually that is your faith. Like you believe in man.
The greatest flaw in atheism is that it doesn't exist.
Right. It doesn't exist.
That's really the problem.
I
There's no
love
such
that.
thing. It just doesn't exist. You see it all the time. As somebody who says they're a devout atheist, and then whatever their thing is, it's like January 6th was an insurrection and threat to our democracy, and it's like religion.
Yep. Climate
Religion.
change.
Yep, religion.
The world's
Woke-
going to end. I'm like, you're actually
Wokeism, religion.
they're cults, but they're all little cults.
By the way,
right?
this libertarianism is another one. I've seen this out of like hardcore atheist libertarians, where then libertarianism becomes their religion. I mean, like all of this stuff. It's like the desire to worship is so hardwired in us that you just can't get out. You can't get out of it. You're going to worship something, and then what ends up happening is that if you don't have God in your life, then whatever is next in line, like whatever your highest thing is, becomes your God. Like and I don't mean that like literally, like you don't necessarily have to ascribe supernatural like elements to it, but it kind of doesn't matter. It's like once it's at the top of your hierarchy, it's kind of like you're going to end up worshiping this in some sense. That's not just in a rational way, in an irrational way, because we're not rational creatures, at least not entirely. And that could be not so bad. Like if let's say you're in like a really great marriage and you really love your kids, and that's the most important thing to you. Like you don't have God in your life, but like you have a really great marriage and you're really good to your kids. And that almost kind of becomes like what you worship. That's okay. Like that could be all right. You could still be like a good person and get through that. But man, like if you don't have that also, like if you don't have a marriage and you don't have kids and you don't have God, whatever the next thing, which almost always ends up being yourself in one form or another, you end up like creating this religion to yourself. I mean, look, when you see, what's her name? Chelsea Handler, who's always constantly trying to convince everybody how happy she is. I'm like, maybe she is.
Like,
I don't
take
know.
pills. I'm really happy.
But it's like, she's like, skiing.
Like I just took 6 Xanax. I'm really happy.
Yeah, skiing in a bikini, smoking a
I'm
blunt,
really
like chugging
happy.
wine.
Yeah, I'm like,
look how happy I am. And he's like,
look at
no,
my
this is
breakdown.
a religious like service right now. You're just worshiping the self. I mean, and it's the lowest of it. Like it's so much better. Even if you don't believe in God, like God is real, but even if you don't believe God is real, going to like a church and all being in a community and all deciding that there's something more important than any of us, you know, there's something greater than all of us, there's more important than us, and we're all going to worship that thing, is so much better for you than worshiping yourself and just decadence and just like whatever feels good in this moment. I mean, like everything we have, everything about civilization comes down to time preference. In other words, to deferred gratification. Everything we have, including ourselves existing, like, is because for so many generations, people had kids and thought about the next generation and like worked first. You know, what's that old line that I'll end up butchering? But like, a man plants a tree, the shade of which he knows he'll never see, or whatever. It's like you're doing things for the future, you know, and that's what civilization is when you think about it. The essence of civilization is like, okay, we're going to start planting crops for next season. We're going to start building now. We won't have shelter now. We're going to start building now. Actually, right now is going to suck a lot more because we have to build something. We have to work. But later, it'll be a little bit better. It's always like putting your effort to something greater than just you right now in this moment. And even you next year could be something greater than just you in this moment right now. And that's what's so tragic about like militant atheism, is whether they mean to or not, they always end up robbing like the thing that's greater than you, which is the best part of life, by the way.
It really
This is
is.
the best part of life. Best part of life is, and this is a real, like, there's a seeming contradiction or an irony or something like that in it, right? But everybody knows this on some level. The best thing in life, the happiest you could ever be, is when you're putting other people above yourself.
I can't explain that in better words. I think that you've just described that so eloquently. And I regarding faith, that's what I try to tell people is it lifts the burden. And it's one of the strangest things. Like, obviously my life has changed a lot this year, and people have asked me and they've checked in with me. And I remember being on this like Catholic pilgrimage, which is one of the things that I did right after. Literally, you walk 69 miles in 3 days. It's unbelievable. It's nothing, the pain that your body's going through. And you're walking in your little tribe. I was in the American Australian group, and you've got a priest and you're praying the rosary. And I remember having a conversation with this priest, and it's so hard to explain to people that when you fully accept, and it's not even accept, it's like, it's just an understanding. Like now, really honestly, history and politics even brought me closer to faith, because I was like, it's all about faith. You just don't realize it, that your faith is being converted. It lifts a burden. Like, to have to be your own God, that's why you're like awful, because you're not meant to do that. Like, you're not a God, and you're bad at that. But when you actually, you suck at that. But then when you actually realize that there's this huge picture and that this is not it, and that God is real, I can't explain to you, there's like a lightness in my steps now. And I think that might be what is driving the media even more crazy about me, is that I'm happy suffering. Like, they're like, but we've called you everything. We've called you everything short of a rapist, and we're working on that one. We've called you a self-hating Black person. We've called you an anti-Semite. We've called you a racist. We've called you a Holocaust denier. How are you still smiling and happy? And I'm like, dude, because I realize how small and meaningless that is. When you have true meaning, then the meaninglessness becomes even more apparent. And I'm like, you're dweebs. You're all, you mean nothing in the scheme of things. And now I'm living for things that actually matter. And it's all been right here in front of me. It's like, what does the Bible tell you about family? It's like, then you're like, oh, wow, this book that they conveniently removed, the Department of Education did, one of the first moves that was done was the lawsuits that went through. And then suddenly you're like, no, don't teach the Bible. It's like this great book of wisdom. And it's just a beautiful thing. And I wish people could have that happiness and have that lightness in their step by knowing that, like, all of this means a lot, but also in the end, all of it is really meaningless. Like, you are so small, and there's something that's so beautiful when you truly come to the understanding of just how small and insignificant you are. And I know that sounds like a great paradox. And
but it does, and it kind of is, but it weirdly also is not. And like, look, for me at least, like, so I was an atheist for many years.
Me
and
too.
I found God, you know, right. You know, the thing is, like, because it's like, it's a weird, it's like, no, when you find God, you realize you always kind of knew, you know, so it's kind of a weird dynamic. But one of the things, at least for me personally, I'll say that really changed, that has enormously improved the quality of my life, is that I spend time almost every day, I want to say every day, I might miss a day here or there, but almost every day, I spend time being really grateful for what I have. And that was something I never even really thought to do before I like had a relationship with God. Like it was always just kind of like, well, I don't know, this is here. It's just here and that's what we're doing. What would be fun? Okay, this would be fun to go do or whatever. And now I try at least once every single day to just spend just like a few moments being so grateful. And they're like, what an amazing gift this world is. I have so much. I have like a great family. I love my career. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, wow, I've got it really good right now. And I also recognize that that could go away. You know, like it's a lot of this is out of my power, but like, hey, I'm so grateful that I have this all right now. And that makes you a much happier person, like to be grateful for what you have. And then also there's things where it's like, look, even anybody who's got kids out there knows that there's just something about like, you know, the joy your kid brings you is just like, you can't, you know, it's just, you'll never get that out of yourself.
Yeah, you can't explain that. And I want everyone to be a parent because of that. Because I'm just like, you cannot explain the joy that children bring in your life. It's indescribable. Even when they're driving you insane, like you're cracking up afterwards. You're speaking with husband. I'm just like, what is he even like? Who's he listening to? Like, and then I'm like, he gets that from you. And he's like, he gets it from you, right? When he's being a perfect angel, he gets that from me.
I've had those conversations with my wife. Yeah,
and it's so beautiful. And I want people to be encouraged in that and to follow people that make you understand that. And I think Dave, for whatever reason, like obviously you're one of the ones. That's how I say it. I'm a vibe person. People that listen to this podcast know I'm a vibe. Don't roll your eyes, crew. And I just got a vibe from you. Like I credit to Skylar because when you weren't on my radar, and Skylar, when we were back on the old show, was like, gotta give Skylar, listen to Dave Smith for a long time. Gotta listen to Skylar. I'm like, who's this Dave Smith? And like some clips were going viral, you, and then I started listening to your stuff, and I was like, wow, okay, he's one of the ones, and people feel it. The vibey people out there. It's like Tucker Carlson. There's you. There's Joe Rogan, and I just feel like God is putting you in some position. And I also feel this way about Andrew Tate in a weird, people go, how could you think that? I don't know. I just feel like God gave him that platform. And now he's recognizing I have this huge platform and tons of young boys are listening to me. What am I going to do with that? And everybody's walk up to that moment is complicated, but you're in this unique position. People are really starting to listen to you. And I know this is like a very heavy question, but how do you see what's happening right now? Like, how are you taking that, I guess, that responsibility? Like, are you just, I'm just going to commit myself to saying the truth and be bold in saying the truth and hope that that's enough? Or are you like working on some other stuff? Are you working on a book? Like, I feel like a lot of the false idols are falling apart is what I mean when I say the scales are falling in people's eyes. And like, you're kind of one of the people that people are realizing is really authentic.
Well, I mean, I think you're really one of those people. But I think it's not. Well, I think like number one is kind of unlike what I was saying before. It's not lost on me how cool it is, what I get to do, and how kind of, you know, it's a big deal. It's a big deal to like have your voice heard by so many people and to always like treat that with respect. And then my job, I feel like, is to really know my stuff and not, you know, because it's always like, we're all human beings, so we all have a tendency to like cut corners or like not. And you're like, no, I have to make sure I do my homework. I have to make sure I'm right, at least to the best of my ability. I'm correct about all this stuff. But like, as I was saying to you before, I think the way I look at it is like, so as you know, as people know, in September 2001, 9/11 happens. In 2003, we invade Iraq. All of 2002 was building the propaganda campaign to invade Iraq. The entire year. If you remember, if you're old enough to remember what that year was like, every single week, the New York Times and CNN and Fox News and every powerful person was making sure that everyone knew that obviously Saddam Hussein has nuclear weapons and he was clearly in on 9/11 and he's going to give one of these nukes off to Al-Qaeda, and then the next 9/11 is going to be a nuclear bomb dropping on America. So what are you? You know, what are you, a queer, or you want to go bomb Iraq? Those are your two options, right? Like, are you America-hating wimp, or do you want to go bomb Iraq? And at the time, we had nothing like what we have right now. And I go, if they tried to do that again now we got Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, and literally the biggest shows in the world would all just be shredding that propaganda, just destroying it if they tried to do it now. And so like I think there's this crazy new thing that we have now where, and this is why I think part of why the elites are freaking out so much, why they freak out about you so much, is because it's like they feel they're losing control. And they're right. They've lost the monopoly on information, which is like a crazy thing to lose. And then to your question about me, I kind of see my role as being like, oh, well, I'm fortunate enough that I get to be one of the guys who's like on all of these shows and like being like, okay, so when I'm on them, my job is to like make the most overwhelming, compelling pitch of like, here's why this propaganda is all complete bullshit and why you should know that. So I feel like that's my role. I don't have any plans to write a book because I'm not a particularly good writer. I'm much better verbally than I am at writing. I've never been a very good writer, and I just feel like there's great people who already do that. But just know, anyone out there, if I ever write a book, just know I didn't write that book.
You should do a podcast series. That's what you should do, a podcast series going like every war. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
because that's what you're brilliant at. You're really brilliant at, like when I was like, oh, I actually realized I know nothing about this issue. You're able to just kind of break it down in layman terms. I think that really is your gift. Like when you were debating Ami, you're like, okay, let's just pause for a second. Let me break down what's actually what he's saying and apply it to something else. And I think that is what's missing, is that so much of history has been wiped. I don't remember that year because I was so young when 9/11 happened. We need to start going backwards and slowing down history. And I think like doing the history of war with like, that's like a easy series that you should be doing. I'm like giving you homework here, but first of all, I just want to say thank you for coming back. I would have you every day. If you lived here, I would quite literally be like, we're doing a podcast together and you don't get any say in this. On top of this, you're also a comedian that's on tour. I'm actually gonna be able to watch you very shortly. So please tell everyone where they can find you and where they can support you, because I know that this will motivate people to go watch and listen to everything that you do.
Oh, well, thank you so much. ComicDaveSmith.com has all like my tour dates if you want to come see a show. I'm touring all over the place for the rest of the year. And then my podcast is Part of the Problem, and partoftheproblem.com is where you can go to support that. But thank you. I'm excited for you to come out. It's going to be a fun time.
Absolutely. Dave, once again, this will not be the last time we will have him back, guys.